security. In fact, a software bill of materials. Wouldn't it be great if you had a list of all the dependencies in your software so that as a security team, you could go through it and you could know exactly where you stand and you didn't have to go out and trace down all the dependencies and pull them down from their different places. Recently, after I did a video about Go Mod Vendor, which, as you probably know, creates a vendor directory inside of your Go project that pulls down all of the essential software that Go project depends upon, which means that it actually brings down the non-test files. Any of the .go files are brought down, the README, the license, and some stuff like that. And it puts it in a directory called vendor. I've done a separate video about this, but I've been kind of turned on to this idea. In fact, I do it everywhere now. There are lots of reasons. There's another video about the 5 ways to use private repos in your CI/CD when you're doing Go builds. And then there's another video, a 6th one on Go Mod Vendor, about how that solves that entire problem by not having your module have any external dependencies whatsoever. They're all internal. And after I made that video, a security person came to me and said, "Hey, did you know about this software bill of materials and the SBOM from CISA?" And I was like, "No, what's that?" So the American Cyber Defense Agency, which is actually a really cool place to work, if you ever wanted to work there, this is not an advertisement for the Cybersecurity Defense Agency. But if you are okay, giving up your life essentially to the government, having them know everything, every single little thing about you, and you're an American and you want to get access to technologies that you cannot use legally any other way, the American Cyber Defense Agency is one of the places that would be really great to work. The National Coordinator for Critical Infrastructure Security and Resilience, otherwise known as CISA, Critical Infrastructure Security and Resilience. So it was actually recently, before we get into this, there was recently y'all know I've been in security for a long time, unofficially. I mean, I've been doing security things, security compliance audit software and all of that kind of thing. I've been hacked, I've hacked, so I'm interested in security. If you had to peg me, I'd probably be more of a gray hat than anything. But the gray Jedi, right? Gray Jedi, they're the cool Jedi. So why would any of this have anything to do with that? Well, whenever you're writing software, you want to be sure that you don't add a vulnerability. And if you want to look up the biggest vulnerability, and as far as I'm concerned, the biggest one ever, there was a worm, and I can't even remember the name now. There had been more than one. There's been more than one major worm, which is when somebody puts software into a dependency and that makes it into software, and then that software gets deployed to the world. The XY compression algorithm that was going to go into SSH, actually, that was also the same sort of system. It was like a dependency, and if you read the history on that one, they were actually attacking the maintainer of that project. It's absolutely fascinating. There's a write-up of, I think it's on Wired, about that. But again, what does this have to do with Go Mod Vendor? Well, in every one of those cases, whether the person's overworked or whatever, it wouldn't matter as much because you would have a local, bill of materials. That's what the bomb is for. You'd have a local bill of materials that talks about all your dependencies that would be present and accounted for. So let's go through and read this, and then I'll make my conclusion here. So the software bill of materials has emerged as a key building block in software security and software supply chain risk management. So I don't think I need to tell you that the enterprise and everybody else needs to focus on security more, right? Supply chain, what is a supply chain? If you're new, this terminology, supply chain is every single thing, all the systems that exist that get you what you need from point A to point B. To give you an idea of this, when I worked on the Nike ID project, the supply chain was the biggest challenge because, somebody could go into a website and order up a name or something, and it would show up on their on their shoes, and it was a supply chain nightmare because, they would have to change one piece at one port, and then that would have to be communicated and would have to be filtered down. The other place that people hear supply chain all the time is the lack of electronics over the last couple of years because of the backup from COVID and electronics not being available. Another very, very, very popular supply chain attack. Um, a story about it was when, and there's still debate about whether this even happened. This was actually a Bloomberg article, and I'll just refer to it. It was one of the biggest hacks in history, and it was a supply chain issue where allegedly video cards were taken, and then there was a chip placed on the video card, and when the chip was placed on the video card, in other words, allegedly in China, the producers of these electronics were not aware, and they were unpackaged, and then the chip was placed on the video card, and the GPU, and then they were repackaged and they were shipped off to the States, and allegedly these things landed inside of Amazon servers, and you can go read the Bloomberg article about that. Let me go. Actually, this is Bloomberg. Let's see if I can find it. Supply chain hack, and I wasn't gonna. The tiny chips were allegedly. Here we go. Bloomberg recently the big hack. Here it is. Okay, so again, this is just to draw a comparison. The big hack: how China used a tiny chip to infiltrate U.S. companies. Making a video. My wife just walked in. All right, so here we go. Amazon being kind of quietly evaluating a startup. Blah blah blah. So this is actually extremely controversial. The point is that the supply chain, in other words, all of the vendors along the way that provide a thing, are targets, and any point in the supply chain along the way can be a target, right? It can be attacked, it can be taken out, right? Well, what does this have to do with software? So the software supply chain, to go back to read the terminology here. The software bill of materials has moved as a software supply chain risk management thing. So software has the same problem because software can be, there's multiple dependencies. You have this project has a dependency on this other project, and and they all live all over the place, right? And depending on how the software, I mean, if you look at NPM, Node Package Manager, and how it was created, I mean, I don't want to go there, but at one point you had to send a personal email to Isaac Schuler to get your dependency made, and there was no validation whatsoever, and you were in. And there are things like the abomination, which is JSX, which actually runs software from an external with multiple external dependencies on your machine without even validating any of it. And just to give you a sense of the comparison, there was no checksum evaluation to tell whether you were even the actual software. There was no man in the middle attack check. There was nothing. So there's a million ways you could attack the software supply chain in those cases. You would go after the software that was getting pulled down, right? And in any way, I think the biggest worm of all, they actually were able to take over one of the accounts and publish a malign, Trojan version of a package, and then that package then got built into everything else, and then that then affected every single project that used that dependency. Okay, so that's the attack vector. If you're going to attack a system, you're going to look for the software supply chain and the hardware supply chain, and you're going to find a weakness in there, and you're going to attack it. You're either going to pretend to be that person, or you're going to get some overworked engineer to put your changes in over time, which is how they got the XY thing in, or you're just gonna inject your stuff in the middle of it on the network so that your stuff gets downloaded instead of the other stuff. That's a man in the middle attack. All of these things that I just talked about are kindergarten level basic security considerations for somebody who actually works in security. Right. So again, what does this have to do with GoMod, vendor, and the software bill of materials? So the supply chain that's being attacked, one of the ways to prevent or to know that you're being attacked, or not really to prevent, but to know, is to be able to keep a record of this stuff. An SBOM is a nested inventory, a list of ingredients. that make up software components. So this is the list that you want. This is where all the things are being made. While not a brand new concept, the ideas and implementations have advanced since 2018 through a number of collaborative efforts, including National Telecommunications Information Administration. CISA is advancing the SBOM adoption of practice by facilitating community-led work with a focus on scaling and operationalization, big word there, as well as tools, new technologies, and new use cases. This website will also be a nexus for the broader set of SBOM resources across digital ecosystem around the world. An SBOM-related concept is the Vulnerability Exploitation Exchange, exploitability. A VEX document is an attestation, a form of security advisory that indicates whether a product or products are affected by known vulnerabilities. So if you ask me right there, I think this is just fancy speak for stuff that's kind of already in existence. I could be wrong. So obviously, I'm pretty new to this, to the SBOM thing. So let me know. We do have you know, nationally renowned cybersecurity architects in our community, some of whom may chime in a little bit. It might be early for some of them, who have actually participated in some of this, including consulting with the upper levels of government about how to do this stuff. But at the end of the day, it sounds like, like how GitHub will just give you a report on all your vulnerabilities. Well, that's kind of the sort of thing. I think that's what a VEX document would actually be. CISA also advances the SBOM work by facilitating community engagement to advance and refine SBOM, coordinating with international industry and interagency partners about SBOM implementations, and promoting SBOM as a transparency tool across broader ecosystem, U.S. government, and the world. If you ask questions, please blah. So this seems to me like they're trying to come up with some standardization across the board, across all software. And this is where GoMod vendor comes in, because some applications already do this, right? And let's pick on C for a bit, right? And everybody loves to pick on C, especially Rust people. But C is just a language, right? It's a language that was created to create Unix. They didn't really think about, how are we going to itemize all the dependencies and stuff? Now they have that, and there are many tools that do this now, but they were added after the fact, and I'm not acquainted with that ecosystem of tools, but I'm, in terms of running GoMod vendor or looking at a Go checksum file, which I'm sure you guys have seen, when even if you have even when you have here, let's take my little thing, my little YAML thing that I've been doing. If you do, the idea of having a go.sum file that has all your dependencies and the checksum for that specific dependency, that specific package, is not something that comes with C. It's kind of packed on. Here we have the actual list of the requirements, and over here we have the vendor directory, which contains my vendored code. As you can see, there's no _test in there, and you need to understand how that works. There's something I think is interesting here too is that Go PKG YAML v3. This creates a directory structure that matches that specifically matches the path from the module, and not necessarily the source code. So the source code for go-package.in/YAML v3 is actually in go-YAML /YAML. That is the GitHub repo for this. I can show you. You can clone go pkg, let's see, YAML/YAML, and we see here that we are in the YAML project, and you can see that let's see, we can cancel this one right now. So find vendor, let's compare the list here. So you can see here we got decode.go, and over here we have decode.go, but we don't have this here. So again, that's just a reminder of what is done. You'll see the license, the README, the notice is copied over. So those things are all brought over. And the equivalent of an SBOM here. So I assume that they're working on coming up with an SBOM that kind of itemizes or comes up with ways to itemize the dependencies inside of a software package for everything, not just for um, in one particular way. But what I'm trying to demonstrate here is that Go, first of all, Go already does this by putting everything in the Go mod file, including the exact version it was used, and the checksum, which can be used to validate that software, and that is not turned off. Hey, how are you? We're making a YouTube video here about security, and so if you look at that, you can see, so you already get to feel happier about this. Let me show you one other thing. So let's just cut to the chase here. So what makes you as a security person feel better? Having uh having all those dependencies listed in a single file with the checksums, and then having the people building that software, if you were auditing, which one would you find easier to use? This is where this question is really coming from. Okay, which of the following would be easier for you to deal with as a security auditor? Right? Yeah, I'm going to paint two scenarios. One of them is you come into the software project, and you look at this here, and you're like, okay, I'm going to go look at go.mod. Actually, let's give you a good one. I'm going to pick on one. I'm going to pick on Kubernetes, which is disastrously bad. Yeah, I cannot help myself. Let me see if I can find it again. Yeah, I did a video about this earlier. The Kubernetes project is just so bad. Okay, so pretend you're a security auditor, okay? You're a security auditor. And you're like, okay, I want to follow SBOM. I want to figure out what things are safe. What things can I look at? How do I know all of this system's dependencies? Well, if it's Go, you might not know it's Go. If it's a security auditor, you're not expected to know every single language out there, right? So, I mean, but maybe you at least have some casual sense of Go. So you go in here and you say, okay, well, let's look at Go mod file. And it's like, oh, okay, well, okay, so it's using an old version of Go, an old, extremely insecure version of Go, which already that's a flag, right? This isn't even in patch level. This isn't even, this is just like, so we're not going to go there. Secondly, we're going to say, okay, well, what requirements does it have? I mean, if I want to create an SBOM document, let's assume that the SBOM standard has emerged, and that, I mean, as government stuff goes, they usually end up coming up with some standard way to put it, even though it's not particularly useful. And then you end up having to like take whatever your project is and then create another document out of that document, right? So I'm not saying that's what's going to happen with SBOM, but I assume that's the kind of thing that's going to come out of it, and that means you're going to have to take a thing and convert it over, right? So here we have the Go require file. I mean the require setting, and that's all the dependencies for this project, not everything else. So that's the beginning of that list, right? Except there's other dependencies here that are not here. Now, for better or worse, there are two dependencies here on external projects which are not really publicly shown. And they got once again, they got the checksum files here for these things. And then, but see, if you look at the Go YAML file, the v3 file, you see that this package is a fork of the Go YAML library and is intended solely for the consumption of the Kubernetes project. This is a fork of blah, 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 right? So what they've done is they've vendored this, even though they didn't use Go mod vendor, which I complain about in another video. So this is another project. Go YAML v3 is another project. So there's a dependency on that. But as an auditor, this is kind of interesting. As an auditor, it makes it much easier for me because I can now look at the source code that's there. I don't have to go pull it down. Now, even though as a Go developer, I'd be kind of confused, like, why are you not putting that all in the vendor directory? That I still have the software there. So as an auditor, the very simple point I'm trying to make, as an auditor, it's much easier to have the list of all the dependencies and also a copy of all the relevant code from those dependencies available in the project, snapshotted at a specific version with checksums that prove that that is the actual version that was listed in the dependencies. That is what Go mod vendor does. The alternative to that is to have just the list of dependencies and a list of checksums, but to not actually validate where that software is coming from. So, in order for you to understand this, we have to kind of replay what it means to build software in Go, and I'll try to keep that simple. But right now, when you do Go build or Go install or Go get, I mean, Go get is implied in all of them. What happens is you do Go get, and assuming it's all dependencies on public stuff, it's private. It's a pain in the butt, and I've made videos about that. But if it's public, then what does it do? Go goes out to the checksum, the publicly available checksum cache servers. I think they'll go pkg.n. I think those are the ones, and it checks to see if the version it goes and gets a cached compiled version of the dependency and downloads it. It downloads the source code for that, and I believe it downloads the binary as well, and it goes to a caching server. There, Google maintains a number of publicly available caching servers, and those caching services are locked down, and they're dependent on by all the Go projects that build anything public. And that brings down the thing. It brings down the checksum that's declared by the project, and that checksum is then checked after that cached compiled thing is downloaded. Whether it compiles it on the fly or downloads the binary, I'm pretty sure it downloads the binary, but it downloads the binary that is eventually going to get statically linked into the final project. And it sticks that into your caching server, which is in your Go directory, wherever that is, and then it makes sure that it still matches the checksum. So it's doing everything that you should do if you download something from the internet. If you download anything from the internet, you should download it and you should check it against the checksum to make sure nothing happened in the download process, the man-in-the-middle attack. So Go by default, and by the way, it has always done this. It's never been subjected to man-in-the-middle attacks because it's always, at least in the module system, has always done this. It's always downloaded and checked these things against the checksum because they care about security. In fact, recently they've even made additions to make it so that the same binary will always compile in the same way, so that you have binary compatibility depending on, so that you can actually ensure that if the signature of the binary changes at all, that there's been some tampering going on. And that's probably a good idea because Go is extremely popular with hackers. There's an article, 4,000% increase in Go popularity 2 years ago by hackers because they can take the same exact C code or whatever, they can obfuscate the footprint of the binary and recompile it any code as Go, even though Rob Pike has explicitly said, please don't write malware with Go. It actually turns out to be really, really good for malware. And for that reason, you're starting to see lots and lots of packages written in Go. So being able to identify it is a big thing. That also means that hackers know how Go works and they know how to attack the software supply chain. In this case, the dependency trees that come into the final project, right? So as you can see, so let's think about if you're a hacker, what are you going to attack, right? You could attack the middle network, middle connection. You could attack the software caching servers, which is how the worms of the NPM were done. You can attack the people who write the source code that gets put into the caching servers so that it bypasses all that. You can attack that. Or you could, of course, you could attack the actual repo itself where the software is if you have access to that. Those are all the places you could attack. But when it comes to auditing, so what happens if there is a security breach? And this is where Go Mod Vendor really, 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 really shines. I said 3 reallys on purpose. Okay. Imagine this scenario. So you're a security auditor, right? And there is a critical, I don't know how, but a critical vulnerability makes it into a dependency of your project. Okay. So let's pick on, I don't know, let's pick on YAML v3, right? So YAML v3, which is used by literally tens of thousands of projects probably at this point. Let's say YAML v3 gets compromised. And it actually makes it all the way into the caching server, which not the caching server, but makes it into the, no, that's right, the proxy server, the centralized servers that contain the checksums and everything. So a vulnerable version of Go YAML, and there isn't a vulnerability. I'm just saying this because this is a big one, right? Makes it all the way up to the top, and it is loaded. It is available for everybody. And you don't get affected by it until you rebuild, right? So let's say that vulnerability makes it out and it lives out there for, let's say, a week, right? And anybody who's built their project in the last week, who has updated they'd have to do two things to be vulnerable. Number one, they would have had to have updated their dependencies without checking the source code, which happens constantly. People regularly update, they do go get -u and they update their version without caring. They don't even look at the semantic version because Go has destroyed the Go community has destroyed the relevance of the semantic versioning because nobody actually uses it properly, which I made a whole video about. So they go ahead and they'd have to do a go get to grab the new one without even checking it. And number two, they'd have to build, and then they have to create a release and deploy it, right? Um, and if they're following regular software practices, that should not happen. That really shouldn't happen, but it does all the time. So let's say that happens. Let's say that your stuff gets vulnerable, and then the lid blows off the whole thing, and everybody finds out that your software now has a vulnerability, and that this thing has a vulnerability. Now everybody's running around with their chicken cut, their head cut off. Are we exposed? Did we build recently? Do we have it? And you find out that you do. Okay, now here's the kicker. So let's say the Go YAML project, for security reasons, which is usually code for, oh my God, we are so ashamed of having done this. Let's say that they pull the entire project down, and before you go saying that this never happens, it does happen. It definitely happens, because they literally pull the plug on the whole project. They're like, we do not know where it was vulnerable. We don't know our level of exposure. We have a lot of code to review. We're just gonna turn the lights out on this thing completely. Okay. What happens to you as a developer and your security audit team when the security audit team comes to you for your application and you ask them if you're exposed? You say, well, we did definitely build with that version, right? And then they say something like, well, we'll just build it with the other version. But now you can't. You can't. Why? Because the software that you depended on is now gone. Enter Go Mod Vendor. If you had used Go Mod Vendor as designed, and right before you did those dependencies, if your previous version of the software, before your last build that was good, your snapshot, if you had snapshotted all your vendor dependencies by doing Go Mod Vendor, you would have you'd have a copy of that software and all of its exact dependencies at that point in time snapshot in your code repository. That's what Go Mod Vendor does. And all you have to do is revert. You just have to revert to your last commit and rebuild, and you are guaranteed to be back at that level. Not only that, but now your security auditors have something to look at. If you don't have a copy of the vulnerable software because you didn't vendor the dependent code in your own project, and they pull the plug, and Go YAML in this case, pretending, pulls the plug, you no longer have access to the software to even judge what exactly the vulnerability is for yourself, or ever to even know what it is. And assuming they bring the system back up and everything, they will probably have completely changed. They'll have to change their Git repos. They'll have to have figured out how to prune their trees. There's going to be all kinds of things that they're going to have to do to that project before they can bring it up again, because that vulnerability is going to be there. And they got to make sure that they might even have to rebase the whole entire repo. I mean, who knows, right? The point is, Go Mod Vendor reduces your exposure in the spirit of SBOM, because it is not only a list, a software bill of materials, it's literally the software. Not only do you have a software bill of materials, which you do if you go look at it here, let's go find a new one here. If you go look in the vendor directory under vendor, there's your software bill of materials right there. Oops. Okay, so there it is. I mean, it's not a very big one, right? It tells you what version, it tells you what the dependencies are. That's your software bill of materials right there. It literally tells you every dependency you have and what version. That is in addition, by the way, to the go.sum file, which is also got the checksums in it, It's a similar thing, but the TXT file is a little bit easier to read. So that list of materials there that's in the modules.txt file helps. It's already a software bill of materials. It tells you exactly what version you had, what dependencies you are, and right next to it, yeah, okay, so it bloats your repo, right? But it also causes you to be able to build your software much faster. Anybody who's had, so to anybody who is, this is another advantage of GoMod that I should probably do another video about. But one of the best advantages of having GoMod Vendor done is you do GoMod Vendor once, you wait for all that software to download, which takes a while, and boom, it's there. Anybody that's building your project from that point on, so let's say you have people doing development, they do not have to wait around and mess with their VPN and everything that it takes to get it all there, because you've got it in, you've already got the software there. So all they have to do is clone the one repo. So if you're feeling the pull towards a monorepo, which you shouldn't, because Go does not work with monorepos. You can twist its arm, but it is not designed to work with monorepos because tagging and versioning. So I don't want to get into that. But you get the same speed advantage of a monorepo because all the software has been pulled down and bloated up your Git repo, right? It's software, so it's relatively, but it's the same amount of time. In fact, you'd end up saving more time doing it once for your project and then having everybody just pull down the relevant files than all of the test files and everything. And people put big things in test files stuff. So not only do you have the software bill of materials right there that shows you everything you've got, but now when in our hypothetical case where they pulled the YAML project because of security problems, they got to really get rid of them, you still have a copy of the software. If you didn't have GoMod Vendor, if you hadn't done that, consider what you would have to do. How are you going to roll back? You can't. You can't rebuild. I mean, short of like picking in somebody's like active cache directory and hoping they have that version cached, or hoping that somebody has cloned the repo someplace else, which, by the way, if they did and they left it available with the vulnerability in it, they're probably going to take yours down too. If they're not, they're being irresponsible, right? Why would you fork the YAML project and have a vulnerable fork of it available, even though the one with the vulnerability has been taken down because it's so dangerous? I mean, if you happen to find one like that, why the hell would you bring that software into your project? Because now you can't even trace whether your project has the vulnerability because it hasn't been identified within the source code. The better way to do this is to have one directory, a vendor directory that has all of the snapshotted dependencies and a software bill of materials in the form of modules.txt. That is what GoMod Vendor gives you. It makes you more compliant with the future of, at least in this case, the American Cyber War Division, cybersecurity, cyber defense, their potential requirements that are come, and it makes you just overall feel much happier because you've now got all your stuff. So it goes without saying that as far as I'm concerned, every single project I ever make from now on is going to use GoMod Vendor, period. I do not intend, in fact, I would go so far as to say with the influence of private repo dependency builds, which has hit us with things like GitHub Enterprise Cloud, which forces every single module to be private, just based on the nature of how inner source repos are managed. I would go so far as to say that GoMod Vendor very well, and I don't have enough time into this to decide, but it very well could be the new standard for building any Go project, no matter how big, because of the facility with the ease with which you can download the software and build it without having to wait around for all those other things, and secondly, well, those are the main things. The downside of this is that you do get bloat. You do get bloat, but the bloat, it's about half as much of the bloat as you probably expect because it's just the effective files. And is the bloat worth it based on the fact that no one can remove any of that software from you because it's now part of your project? That's the number one reason you should vendor in the first place. The second one is ease of use, and the third is security. And having the built-in bill of materials. Hopefully that gives you something to mull over. I appreciate the person who suggested that I look at this idea from the Cyber Defense Agency, and You can make your own considerations, but give it a try and let me know what you think. Join us in the Discord. Put it in the comments below. You think I'm full of it? Let me know. You think that I missed something? Let me know. But as far as I'm concerned, I feel much better all around by using GoMod Vendor.